it shows you that core, and then expanding internationally, and then finally reaching out to adjacent, and then exploring the horizon. So it's the same concept. But of course, as we do that, we need to understand, as this says, the innovation risk as we expand away from the core. The problem with these kind of concentric circle charts, no matter what they actually say, is in our mind, we tend to think of this risk vector that goes out from the core, and the length of that vector is kind of associated with risk. And there's some truth to that, but it's not as simple as just the length of a vector and that describing the risk as you move away from the core. It's a little more complicated. So we tried to understand that space a little bit better by creating what we call an innovation space. So if you look at this, what you see is on the x-axis, or abscissa, you have the processes and systems inside the corporation. And they go from limited to established. And on the vertical, you see our expertise and experience from limited to extensive, right? And so where we have lived, where we like to live, is up in the upper right-hand corner, in the core. When we live in the core, we have the processes and systems. We know how to do the FAR. And we have the experience and expertise. We have people who've done that. And life is good. And in fact, the need, if you will, for outside help from, let's say, for example, corporate staff by the business areas is actually pretty limited, because when you work in the core, you have all the tools and capabilities, experiences, et cetera, that you can kind of do things yourself. Well, so now what I've done is mapped on this plane the real 6 things we talked about. And they may not be exactly right, but they're close enough. And so what you see is, as we move away from the core, our understanding of the problem and the associated risk goes down. The risk goes up, the understanding goes down. And to make matters even worse, that plane is not a simple plane that exists in one. It is actually multiple sets of these, and each one of them for every component of the business model. And I've named these, Washington operations and all the words that we use, but you could make them generic and just call them the components of the business model: finance, contracts, et cetera, legal. So we're going to borrow something from our technology friends, and an idea called the TRLs, Technology Readiness Levels. TRLs were developed by NASA to help people understand how mature a technology is, from, on the left-hand side there, the feasibility of a TRL-1 basic research, to, on the right-hand side, the fielding of an actual system, TRL-9. And we kind of group those things in groups of 3 or so, as are shown there. It's a log scale, so there's little confusion between TRL levels. So if Regina Dugan at DARPA picks up the phone and calls AFRL Commander to talk about the development of a program in DARPA, and we're going to get it to TRL-3, I'd like AFRL to pick it up, take it from 4 to 7, and then the center is going to take it from 7 to 9. What do you think? Everybody on that phone call understands that. Okay? So we're going to borrow that concept, and we have developed something called the innovation readiness levels. Same idea. Innovation readiness levels now are going to apply to those planes that I showed you, and we're going to be moving from a limited level of understanding, if you will, that represents the maturity of expertise, experience, processes, and systems. Those, the 2 axes of the chart, kind of representing how close to the core you are, if you will. And so just to kind of recap, this is the process that we're going to use, and the IRL scale is going to move you up and to the right. Right? So how would we go about implementing that? If you know the TRL scale, there are strict definitions for each one of those levels. We don't have those definitions for this. And in fact, it's not one set of 9, it's several sets of 9 that are going to apply a little bit differently in legal than they are in finance, than they are in technology, et cetera. We're going to instantiate, if you will, that IRL concept in every program, every initiative in CE&T, and then we hope that that will expand and be adopted by, maybe first some of the advanced concepts, for lack of a better name, organizations within the business areas. Almost every business area has one. And then more broadly expand, and when we look at adjacent horizon, or whatever we're calling them today, markets, we understand that although the technology tends to be pretty portable, the business model is not always.